No, you're muted, Mila.
How about now?
Technical. Yes.
Yay!
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going good. I'm very excited to see you guys. Hi, Aubrey.
Mila, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I feel like technically you guys have met.
Technically, we met at the wedding.
Yeah.
At the online wedding. But we
Yes.
didn't get a chance to speak, unfortunately.
Yes, that's right. I'm like, okay. Yes, we have.
Yes.
Yay. So, Mila, where are we? Are we at your house?
Yes, we are.
Okay. For some reason, I thought your walls were blue. Why did I think your walls were blue?
No, they've always been this ugly color that I can't wait to get rid of soon.
Really? I thought the color was kind of nice. It's like mauve tan.
You know, it looks like that on the camera, but it's actually this like very ugly terracotta orange type color that makes me think of like, yeah, it makes me think of candy corn. That's not pretty.
Bad? That's pretty bad.
Yeah, like it's terrible. So, but I'm glad that it looks good on the camera at least.
Yes. Okay. So, strangely enough, Mila, and no, I'm gonna rag on you because I can.
Oh, wonderful.
I guess it's not strange. Annoyingly enough, you don't have a website. So I found a really cute bio from Corseted Community.
Oh, cool.
So I was gonna like read that because it was like, well, this is the closest thing I have.
All right, fair. Yeah, that's cool. I think I probably kind of approved it. I'm pretty sure that like some of the ladies in the Corseted community might have edited it a little bit because that happens.
Cool.
But,
how about
you know me well enough to agree or disagree with it.
The only thing I might disagree with is the last part, but there it is. Take a quick read.
Okay, because I'm pretty sure that like somewhere in there they say something like she lives in the beautiful San Miguel, and I would never have written that. So let me double check.
No, the main thing I'm having issues about is she continues to develop her skills as an illustrator and pursue her studies in 2D stop motion and 3D animation. And
yeah, that's not accurate.
To be like, and Mila is an illustrator. She owns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not studying to be a 2D stop motion or 3D animator at the moment. I am focusing on my career as an illustrator and as a what do you call it? A concept artist. That's what I mainly want to focus on within the illustration world.
So. Okay, wait, pause, time out.
Sorry.
She returned to her native country of Mexico in 2009. Is currently killing it with her illustration. What am I saying here?
Yeah, she's currently working as a freelance illustrator.
You can find some of her work on Instagram under Kiwi Fish.
Yes. There you go. Perfect. You can also say that I've been published twice and have an upcoming publication with another book.
Ooh,
that's exciting.
Maybe I should say is currently working as a published freelance illustrator.
I'm okay with that.
I'll ask you about it at the end. Make you sound extra snazzy.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. So the way this works, I already started recording, but Aubrey and I take the audio of our Zoom conversation, and then we edit it down to more of a 45-minute session because we've noticed that most people don't listen more than 45 minutes unless they happen to be doing like road trip across the country like me.
True.
So we try and keep it 45.
Did you listen to our show while road tripping?
Well, I did.
I would.
No. She admits no, but other people would. No. So we take the audio, edit it down, but Aubrey and I both have a Word document open that we can both see that has some like questions that I had set up, but really, I just want to talk to you.
Okay. Lovely.
Because I know, and maybe this is good background for Aubrey as well, but like you and I have such juicy conversations over the phone about all things queer and the South and your own experience. And that's really what I want to touch on. So some of my questions are just like prompts, but really, I don't really care what direction this goes in.
Great.
At any point in time, you can like time out us and be like, I need to pee, or time out, the trash guy is here, or God damn it, my dogs are barking.
Yes, I'm actually going to keep like one headphone out just so that I can hear the background noise and just, let you guys know, because that's the unfortunate reality of living in Mexico.
Yeah, right
comes with
now,
a soundtrack.
Yeah, right now I can't hear jack shit in your background, so I think you're good. I just know that the trash guy ding dong thing is really loud.
Yes, and that's on Thursday, so yes.
See, I still.
Oh no, it's not. It's on Wednesdays. No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Oh, okay, cool. And
I am recording my audio for you as well.
Sweet. And then Aubrey mostly takes mad notes. She's like amazing at taking notes. And she'll interject randomly with her questions, thoughts, and yada yada. So it's like a whole conversation between the three of us. Cool?
Awesome.
Cool.
I love it.
Yay.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yay. Oh, Aubrey, you're in the room again. Should I admit you?
Yes, because I'm switching from my phone to my computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, we're gonna have a double.
I just started recording too. Figured the beginning part we didn't need to know.
Yeah. I was like, not this part.
Not this part. We don't need to talk about how we're trying to embellish my bio.
So I have headphones on top of headphones.
Nice.
So.
Uh-oh, we're getting echo. Wait, maybe not anymore.
I think we're good.
I'm just gonna wait for Aubrey to get queued up on the computer.
Cool. Also, I apologize that I still have like a little bit of a cough.
You sound way better though from yesterday.
I feel so much better. Yes.
No, I'm here. I just had to switch over to my computer.
Cool.
The echo should be gone now.
Aubrey, I think I now can give you permission to record. You should have permission to record.
Yes, I'm recording.
Fabulous. Look at all the recordings we have going on.
Ooh.
I'm trying to get my coughs out. Okay. I will do the intro. Hello. Welcome to Southern Queeries. Today I have Mila. I'm actually not sure if I know how to pronounce your last name correctly. I always say Villasana, and then I'm like,
That's right.
Yeah? Okay,
Villasana,
cool.
right?
I'm gonna back that up. Welcome. Today I have Mila Villasana. She is a Mexican illustrator and designer currently residing in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, in the heart of Mexico. As you guys know, I've talked about it a lot. It is my hometown. Mila was originally born in Cuernavaca, Morelos, and spent her early years in Tasco, Guerrero. Raised in the green mountain air and liberal progressive atmosphere of Burlington, Vermont, she harnessed a love of art, nature, and eco-friendly practices. Oh my God, we could have a whole episode just on that, Mila, just saying.
I know.
After living in the US for over 10 years, her migratory, wow. Migratory, how do I pronounce this? Help.
Migratory, yeah.
That was right. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just cut into that. Her migratory status limited her opportunities to pursue higher education within the country, and she returned to her native country of Mexico in 2009. She works as a published freelance illustrator, and you can find some of her work under her Instagram handle, Kiwifish. Mila, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Southern Queeries.
I'm very excited.
I feel like I've been talking about having, I said this in our previous guest with Olive, but I've been talking about having Mila on the show for like ever, partly because for those who don't know Mila personally or hang out with me a whole lot outside of the podcast, Mila is one of my besties. I talk to her all the time. And we met, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago at SantaCon in Sunnyvale.
Yep. Yep.
What is
It's a
SantaCon?
SantaCon. I mean, the version of SantaCon in which we met was basically a fundraiser organized by the organization that I used to work for, the Mexican Audubon Society. And basically, it's just a fundraising activity during Christmas or the holidays where everybody dresses like Santa Claus and they go on a pub crawl or a cantina crawl in this case. And it just so happened that that year I dressed up as a reindeer. And in a sea of other Santa Clauses, I looked across the room and saw another adorable reindeer who was now my new best friend, India. So,
So
Easy Santa.
Aubrey, picture it. Both Mila and I are the only reindeers. There was one person dressed as a Christmas tree.
I dressed her up, yes.
And I saw a Christmas tree and a reindeer. And from across the bar, I don't know Mila, I've never seen her in my life. I go, "What? You?" And we just like run to each other's arms and jump up and down. And we're like so excited that we found another reindeer. That
Yeah.
was our first meeting. And then the rest of
And
the
hilariously, the second time that we actually got to meet each other again and actually like exchange contacts and really get to know each other, we didn't recognize each other at first because we didn't have reindeer makeup on.
So without the reindeers, like y'all are strangers. Like,
Without the antlers. Like, how are you supposed
Right?
to know?
But she looked strangely familiar.
Yeah.
And I did that thing, as you know, Aubrey. I saw Mila and I was like, "Do I know you?" I just like walked up to her and I was like, "Hey, I've never seen you before. Who are you?" Mila was like,
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
"Hi."
I don't get that. That's a
Oh,
weird
believe
concept to
me,
me.
thank God for extroverted friends because us introverts would never, we would never have a chance in this world.
No,
It was cute. It
that's,
was cute. We
that is
bonded
true.
over like drawing and anime and being bicultural, bilingual, and
Mhm.
shorter than other women at the party.
I
Mila's
like to
not
refer
short.
to it as fun size.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the same thing my wife says, is that she's fun size.
Solid. Yeah.
It's solid. So my first question that I wanted to ask you, Mila, is I'd love for you to tell us how you identify and your pronouns,
Mhm.
and why are you so excited to be on the show?
Sure. So my pronouns are she, her, and I identify as bisexual or pansexual, whatever works. And I am excited to be on the show. I mean, not just in terms of the personal aspect of it, which is that my best friend is producing this, and I've been listening to it for some time, but also just because I think it's really the whole concept of being queer in the South, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way that I perceive it is just like acknowledging that community and inclusion is a thing that is very scarce in the South, and being able to listen to a podcast that has all of these great stories about queerness and about queer people living in environments where it's not necessarily prevalent to be gay and out and be commonly accepted. And I think that that's super important. And I think that that's something that south of your border here in Mexico is very relatable and very necessary. So, yeah.
So I totally want to touch on the controversy of the difference between being bisexual and pansexual.
Yes.
Because you say whichever works, but is there
Yeah.
a context about when you use which term?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that like I've heard you guys talk about on the podcast before, but I think that there's for starters, there is something to be said about the audience in which you're presenting to. So when you're talking to people that are not within the queer community or really know much about the queer community, it's just a lot easier to just introduce myself as bisexual, just because I don't really feel like I need to go into the explanation of what pansexuality is and things like that. And also just in terms of representation, I feel like bisexuality tends to be stigmatized within the queer community. So I want to continue being a representation of that. But in reality and in its truest form, I feel like I identify more so as pansexual because I personally don't really have an interest in people's gender when I am attracted to them. My sexuality is not based on somebody's gender, but rather their humanity. And it's something that I've grown to realize over time, with meeting new people, with meeting new genders, that or with meeting people who identify with different genders, that my sexuality is not determined by their gender. So I think that within the queer community and when I'm talking to other queer people, I comfortably say that I'm pansexual, but as a whole, in the way that I present, I say that I'm bisexual.
So for our listeners who might not know, what are the terms from your knowledge? What does bi mean and what does pansexual mean?
I guess from what I understand of it, or my understanding of it thus far, because I feel like every year you level up in your queerness after you come out. That's like a thing. So in my current understanding of it right now as a baby gay, is that bisexuality means that you are attracted to both men and women. And pansexuality means that the gender of the person does not determine your attraction towards them. And then that makes it more inclusive in terms of people who are non-binary or trans. And it allows for those people to also identify within that sexuality.
Love it. I love it. I feel like there's a lot of grumblings of bi people who feel like they should be able to flow in between both bi and pan, and maybe bi is an outdated term and pan is actually more an upcoming newer term. It's really fascinating also because the flags are different.
Yes.
And some bi people use them and interchangeably like you do. And some people argue that they're both one and the same. But Aubrey, what do you think? Have you heard different terminologies on both bi and or pan?
I have. I think this is one of those issues where there have been so many different definitions. And the question I always have is, who gets to be the authority on what's the correct definition? Because I've heard bisexual being, I'm attracted to my own gender plus other genders. I've heard bisexual as I'm attracted to men and women. I'm attracted to bi, meaning two or more genders. I've heard pansexual being I'm attracted to people regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. I'm attracted to people just based on the person, regardless of how they present. And I think it's just there is no official naming commission or governing body that gets to determine the exact definition. So we're all trying to figure out the best terms that we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, there are like who also governs what the flag looks like. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I will add the link in our show notes. But there is a very extensive, amazing website that talks about the history of the lesbian flag and where it's originated from and what the meaning of the colors in the flag
And how it's changed over time and
and
stuff,
how it's changed
right?
over time and who has credit for building the flag and all that jazz.
Mhm.
And I'm also really curious on like the bi flag versus the pan flag. And I'm always curious to hear people who identify that way, their own definitions and what it means to them, because really the person who gets to govern their own label is the person
The
itself,
person who identifies with it. Yeah.
you know?
No, and I think that it's interesting because I feel like within the queer community, we are all championing this movement away from the gender binary. So I
Mhm.
feel like part of the reason why there is so much stigma around bisexuality is this idea that like it's actually very similar to like discrimination against femme lesbians, is this idea that being a part of the gender binary is so basic and we're so over it and we're moving away from it, and it's old fashioned and colonialized mentality, and it's not, you know, it's not something that we want to be living in anymore, which I agree in a lot of ways. I definitely am on board with that, but at the same time I know that queerness is not about erasure, and that this movement that is trying to move away from the gender binary is about acceptance, and that acceptance means that we're not trying to erase femininity and masculinity. So early on, when I believed that I was bisexual, it was because I, up until that point, when I was a even smaller gaby, um, I thought that I was only attracted to very feminine women and very masculine men. So I thought, okay, well then that means that I am bisexual. I am in one spectrum or the other. And then as I grew into my own and as I started meeting other non-binary people, I realized that that wasn't the case at all, that I could be attracted to anybody. Um, and but I still feel like within our queer community, representation matters and allyship matters, and that for as long as people still identify as bisexual, we should be willing to accept them. And in and of itself, when we're talking about, wait,
Time out.
my Alexa app reminds me when I need to eat, because sometimes I work for so long that I forget. So Alexa is like right now being like, here's a reminder, dinner time. Which is,
Thanks,
you know,
Mom.
yeah, I don't have mom here, so you know,
I
gotta
should
work with what we
probably do
got.
that. It's actually a good idea.
It's not a bad idea. Like I've noticed that it's really helped me
I
with
forget
like,
to eat like breakfast and I forget to eat like lunch, and then it's a
yeah,
good
I
idea.
lose track of time, and the next thing I know, it's 9 p.m. and I haven't eaten since like 12 that afternoon. Like you know, it's handy, but I apologize.
No, it's fine.
You're
I
good.
mean, I can kind of going with what you were saying. I mean, Mexico is such a very gendered society in terms of
Mhm.
norms, culture, in terms of the Spanish language, very gendered.
Yes.
How do we navigate queer culture in a Latin American context?
Yes, I mean that definitely affects us tremendously, and I think that that is something that, at least for me personally, it has affected me in terms of the way that I present and the way that I have embraced my queerness. And you know, the reason why I came out as late in the game as I did in my life is partially because of that, because I grew up with a Catholic father who was for the most part very open-minded, but at the end of the day he was a Mexican Catholic man. um, and even if I was living in this like beautiful liberal utopia that is Vermont, I was still being raised by Mexicans and within the Mexican culture. So it definitely affected me. I can't personally speak eloquently enough about the limitations of our language and how that affects non-binary folk. I know non-binary folk that have tried to navigate that and have, you know, presented new pronouns and have tried to really adjust to the very gendered Spanish language as best as they can. And I find that fascinating, and I'm still learning about it, and I still want to learn about it. So I can't speak to that, but I do know that as far as gender norms are concerned, I mean, I grew up with a dad who was afraid that he was going to quote unquote turn me gay because he was raising girls to be tomboys in his family. And I have two older half sisters who are his daughters, and one of them is gay. And when she came out, my dad immediately thought, well, then that's my fault because she's the one that I hang out with the most. So it means that I like turned her gay by taking her camping, just these very outdated ideas of what gender is, and what the expectations are of women in Mexico are just very cemented in our culture. And I think that might have, to some degree, also been a subconscious way in which I identified or related to my attraction to other women as well. The fact that in the beginning I thought that I only liked women who were feminine, where did that idea of femininity come from in the first place, if not my upbringing and the world that I lived in? So yeah, I think Mexico definitely shapes that that inner homophobia that many of us have before we are brave enough or confident enough or comfortable enough or safe enough to come out, for sure.
So on that note, what is your coming out story?
The funny thing is that I don't necessarily have one, which is fine because I feel like we need to kind of normalize that a little bit. I think that when I realized that I was gay, I treated it as a very matter-of-fact thing where I just sort of transitioned slowly into being like, oh yeah, I do like girls as well, and it's not just an experiment. And I just didn't really have this like announcement or big realization or anything like that necessarily. And I'm technically not out to my parents necessarily. I think it's one of those like they know, but they don't know. Because the entire time that I have been out, I haven't lived in the same place as my folks. And that is a conversation I would like to have in person. Mm-hmm. So I'm not out to my dad, and that's really important to me. And that's something that I'm slowly building towards. I'm teaching him some stuff about feminism and queer rights first, and kind of prepping him before I actually say, hey, I'm bi.
Mila's like, but you set this up with some stepping stones.
I am totally grooming my dad into like accepting me. And I asked my therapist, who is also in the queer community, and I was like, is this manipulative of me? And he's like, no, you're fine. Do whatever you need to do. It's all good. I'm like, okay, good. So yeah, so I don't really have like a coming out story necessarily, or at least I haven't finished my coming out story, because I think that the thing that I've been learning with just hearing other stories of queer folk is that our coming out doesn't happen in one fell swoop. We have so many different steps within our queer stories.
Also, it never ends.
It just never ends.
What you look like, it never ends.
That is very true. That is very true.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, what does your boyfriend think?
My boyfriend, I mean, he forgets that I'm gay most of the time, because it's not something that I actively talk about a lot. He has said in the past, like, it's a non-issue, and he's like, well, it's cool that you like the same things I like. The way that he put it. So yeah, I think he's been curious, and I think that he has been very open-minded in terms of learning about queer culture. And over the past 3 years that we've known each other, he's been slowly more willing to ask me questions, even about things that don't pertain to me directly, like trans issues and non-binary issues. So that's been pretty cool.
I love it. I love it. So I'd love to hear from your own perspective because we also asked Ale Marquez, a good friend of mine who's in San Miguel, about her own perception of where and how the how is the queer, can't even speak.
Yes.
The queer climate of San Miguel.
Thank you. Yes.
Basically, yes. Yes. How is the queer climate of San Miguel?
We are in a drought, folks. Like, I would say, I mean, I can only speak for myself, and like, I don't want to discredit the organizations and the people that have tried to build a queer community in San Miguel, because I know that that's been a thing. I know that there's like Colectivo 41, I think it was called. So like, I don't want to discredit those people, but I would say that I don't necessarily feel like there is much of a queer community in San Miguel. And I think that a lot of that has to do with misinformation within gay people in San Miguel, because we live in this environment that is very conservative and Catholic and binary. And I think that that's kind of a product of that, because there's definitely queer people in San Miguel. I know many of them, but we don't gather and talk about queer culture. And I feel like when you grow up or when you're in environments that are very conservative or homophobic, you tend to think that having a queer identity is a bad thing. And that you don't want that to be your identifier. So why would you hang out with a bunch of other queer people when that's not the only thing that you are? And it's unfortunate and it's very detrimental in terms of allyship within our community, because we don't get to know each other's stories and we don't really get to know how we relate to one another. I mean, I feel like one of the things that I think about in terms of building a queer community in San Miguel, because I hope to do so when the pandemic allows us to be a little more social. And I've had conversations with other gay friends about this, is that it's a matter of feeling safety and feeling acceptance and just allyship. I would like to think that at some point in my life, if I do come out to my father, that I will be able to deal with that in a community of other queer folk that understand what that was like after I have that conversation.
Bringing a sense of belonging, I think, is a big one. And I feel like you and I talk a lot about finding our own place and sense of belonging because we have such different backgrounds. For context for my listeners, as well as Aubrey, the thing that I find constantly fascinating about my relationship with Mila is she's Mexican born but raised American, where I'm like American born, raised in Mexico. So we have mirror images of our intersectionality, and we also happen to have like a shit ton in common. I find myself gravitating to a lot of the same things that Mila is doing or saying because we both have one foot in each country, and we have a lot of commonalities on like, and I guess the other thing that's really interesting is like Mila has Mexican parents, whereas my primary parent, my mom, is very American. So I understand the concept of having a Mexican dad because that's how my dad is. But her mom is Mexican, whereas my mom is very American. So, but Mila has been exposed to Americanized parenting. So she also sees and understands it. So we have all these different understandings. So I feel like you came out to me in a very matter-of-fact way. You just kind of like just were like, yeah, whatever. And I was like, wait, what? And it was just like a flow into conversation, but having that additional layer of intersectionality onto your queerness and then being in San Miguel where there isn't a sense of belonging can be really startling. And then on top of that, add the lack of sense of belonging that people think, like Mila looks very Mexican, whereas I look more American comparatively. And we're constantly battling with people judging and having all these different bias.
Not thinking that you're enough.
Yeah, not thinking you're enough. You're too white, you're too brown, you don't have an accent. You should have an accent, and going back and forth. And then on top of that, you don't look gay enough, or you know, it's great that you don't look gay, and you are constantly being code switching over and over again. So it could be such a huge relief and safe, giving a place of safety, but also a sense of belonging, which is very hard to find when you share multiple identities and multiple badges for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, well, I mean, touching on that idea of you know, having different identities in terms of your culture, you know, being bicultural and being gay were both sort of transitions into like awakening of my own persona and who I am, because I think those two happened around the same time. My acceptance of my Mexican identity, as well as my acceptance of my own gender and of my own sexual orientation. They were all kind of coming around the same time. A lot of it is a decolonized structure of who I was versus who I am now. And it's interesting to come to that place of just, as a queer person, you're constantly grappling with a sense of belonging and a sense of how you fit into society. And that is ever changing and constantly progressing. And the more that we have representation, the more that we have community, the more that we're able to do that. I connect with India because we are bicultural. I connect with my boyfriend because we are bicultural. And it strengthens those bonds. So having a queer community that understands those things are not self-isolating events that have happened in your life, but there are things that have happened to all of us, and that there are commonalities, as well as an openness to just be whoever you are and express yourself however you want, is a very necessary thing in order to just function in society, and for your own mental health and for your own well-being and growth. I mean, I think that that's like one of the things that I think about in terms of my queer identity is my friendship with you, India, because I feel like you're kind of my gay godmother in a way. Like, I feel like there's so many ways in which you've educated me, and there's so many ways where, like, I remember one time you told me like, oh, you're like queer as fuck, dude. And I remember you saying that and feeling like that was like a badge of honor. Like, I feel like I elevated that day. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't identify that way at all, but yeah, sure. And it's just like, I've talked to other gay people in San Miguel, and I've realized that they have a very limited understanding of queer culture sometimes. And it's interesting to watch that happen. I had a conversation with a gay friend of mine, and I told her, we don't have a queer community in San Miguel. And she said, yes, we do. And I'm like, no, not really, dude. Like, you and I are not a part of like a queer community. And she's like, yes, we do. All of our friends are gay. And I'm like, honey, I don't think that you understand that there's a difference between everybody is a little bit gay, quote unquote, and people who actually identify within the gay community. And thinking that because one of our best friends is a little bi-curious, that does not a community make. And I think that there's this, I don't know if it's a discomfort or a complacency or a little bit of both that happens within this very Catholic conservative environment, where we're just like, well, I'm out, like, that's good enough. what else is there? But I'm having this conversation with this lesbian friend, and I'm telling her about bisexual erasure, and she had never heard of it before.
Wow.
And now she's more empathetic about it. So it's a matter of having a certain, not only sense of community and not only a sense of belonging, but also like I said before, allyship. It's this idea that you can have compassion through understanding other people, that just because being gay is not an issue for you and that you're out here in Mexico and everything is fine, that doesn't mean that there aren't any issues that we need to fight for, or stories that we need to hear, or support that we need to provide to other people.
Well, I think one of the,
I mean,
go ahead, Aubrey.
well, you mentioned this idea about just more stories that we need to hear. So I came out I came out as trans about the same time as Caitlyn Jenner came out, and that's about the only thing we have in common.
True.
But I will say, Caitlyn Jenner's interview helped my parents understand more about my coming out. Is there any type of queer media representation that maybe is helping to expand the conversation, or is there anything on TV, movies, music?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Well,
I feel like
I
we're
will correct.
slowly starting to, and I know that you know a little
I'm
bit
specifically
about that,
Mexican, I'm specifically Mexican, not Latin American, because there's a lot of Latin American representation, but I'm asking specifically Mexican representation.
No, I actually had this conversation with Mila not long ago, but about 2 years ago, a soap opera known as a telenovela in Mexico, which is like our bread and butter. Every Mexican person has to watch a soap opera in the evening, then memorize the like theme song, and
They
then
name their children after the characters.
like it's intense.
It's
Most
deeply
of
ingrained in their
the
culture.
telenovelas that I think of off the top of my head in the past 20 years will have one token gay man. And they're usually hyper
flamboyant and
flamboyant.
Caricatures of them.
They're usually a hairdresser, and they are widely accepted. But gay women.
Okay, that's the same as like black gay black comedies where there's the black gay sassy hairdresser, but that's about it. From the 90s, early 2000s. Okay.
Correct.
Keep going,
2 years ago, right about, my other really great friend, my maid of honor, or my dama de honor, Marcela, introduced me to a soap opera that had a timing out.
I just needed to go.
No, I'm good. She's just dying. She's dying.
I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm like,
we'll miss you.
just
This
holding
is a
it in
good
for a minute.
conversation, but and in memoriam.
No.
I'm sorry. I have a weird sense of humor.
No, that was fantastic. It's not weird if it makes all of us laugh.
So what I was saying is Marcela introduced me to this soap opera that came out on TV Azteca. And TV Azteca would be an equivalent to, I don't know,
DC?
Yeah, maybe DC, or like a big network, huge network. In fact, it's the only network in Mexico that had a side story. They weren't the main characters. It was a side story within the bigger theme of the telenovela of a lesbian couple. It was both great and annoying. And the reason why it was great was because they didn't die. Spoiler alert.
That's good.
Or get canceled, or
get canceled. It was
hypersexualized, hopefully.
Sort of. The reason why it wasn't great was because they were both feminine of center lesbians and had zero representation of community.
Yeah.
But it was the most incredible thing to watch. And in fact, someone out there on the internet cut the rest of the soap opera out and only focused on the story of the lesbians, and you could watch the entire subplot throughout the entire soap opera on YouTube for free.
Ah, see, that's smart. See,
Very cool.
But it was definitely groundbreaking and huge, and then just last year there was a lesbian couple on the cover of Gente, which is like People magazine equivalent in Mexico, having a baby. And it was both awesome but problematic. It was problematic because the women who were having these babies were white Jewish descendants, so they looked very American. Like I could have picked up that magazine and covered the title, and you'd think I'd be picking up, gay
A
parents.
lot of whitewashing in Mexico as well.
Huge whitewashing.
So much colorism.
And it was great because for the first time ever in the year 2020, we had a lesbian couple on the cover of Gente, which to me blew my mind. And it opened up the conversation. Of course, when you look at the post on social media, it is drowning in hate.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and a lot of religious hate. So I don't blame women or trans people not speaking up. I almost feel like Mexico is 20 or 30 years behind.
Yeah.
USA.
I was gonna say that it's definitely one of those things where like our progress is slow, and you just in and of itself, when it comes to women's rights and when it comes to female autonomy within Mexico, I mean, you could be prosecuted as a murderer for having an abortion in the state of Guanajuato. There are still femicides happening constantly all over the country. There are laws that are really backwards and super religious when it comes to custody of your children,
Big
or
time.
being a mother, or just there are so many ways in which we're still really, really behind the curve, unfortunately. So in and of itself, having queer representation in our media is still something that I don't foresee happening anytime soon, unfortunately. It would be great if that would happen, and I think that that's a big step forward, is just having community and open community within towns like our little town here in San Miguel. It's just it is something that definitely involves safety, and it definitely involves acceptance within an otherwise very Catholic conservative country in general. So and we're starting to see it. We have a gay pride parade in Mexico City that I missed the last one, and then the second one was canceled because of
COVID.
the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you both mentioned, the strong conservative Catholicism as part of that culture. And just like in leading up to this interview and the conversation we had a few days ago with our other guest, brain freeze on her name. Oh my God. Ali's not Ali. Yeah. I mean,
Ale.
it's like Ali, the Southern Mexicans with the indigenous community seem to be more open to the idea of being trans or having a third gender as part of their indigenous culture.
Yep.
And I find that interesting, that north-south kind of split there.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, we definitely, you can look at any country that has been colonized. That was you, not me.
No, there's that colonization part of it, though. It's like with the Catholicism, like the religion,
Absolutely.
the European religion being thrust upon indigenous peoples, and now we're still dealing with that cultural output. Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely look at any country that has been colonized, and each of them have their own unique story of how they were colonized. And specifically in Mexico, the way that our colonizers nationalized this identity of Mexico versus Spain, and eradicated or attempted to eradicate indigenous culture by just mixing with us, instead of like in the North, where they were, you know, there was a lot of
Genocide
genocide, and there was,
wiped
yeah,
out Native
and just
Americans.
wiping them out. We created this whole other national identity, which is the Mexican identity, which is mixed. And so when you look at the map of Mexico as a whole, and I'm no expert on this at all, but just knowing the surface level history of Mexico, the states that are in the South still have indigenous cultures, and that they still have indigenous groups of people that are heavily influencing the culture. And but at the same time, the Mexican identity is one that is mixed. And all of us have a little bit of indigenous in us. We don't know what kind of indigenous, we don't know what flavor of indigenous, but we have it. And it's a mix between that and our Spanish colonizers, which is part of the reason why we have so much colorism as well.
Colorism, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's definitely like that difference between, and I don't know if there is any influence on that, and I would love to read something about that. If there's any influence in terms of our proximity to the United States and how that informs the colorism, but I wouldn't doubt that there's a lot of Northern Mexican people that are also a little more Mexican American. When you look at the states up at the border, culturally speaking and physically speaking, they're a little more mixed. And I think that also, and we are like right up against your South.
But
so,
you know, but the northern Mexico is also where you had that forced separation, where we literally split cultures and split towns through the Texas Revolution and the Mexican American War. We literally split a culture over politics. And I think that's such a big issue.
Yeah.
We split whole communities and whole families apart just because of politics. It was,
Well,
government, if you can't tell.
Well, and I was going to add to that, you know, by having that third gender in Southern Mexico, something that I think is really sad is we have tons of different types of indigenous people around Mexico and different languages, native languages to Mexico. So the indigenous people that are in the state of Guanajuato are going to look very different from the indigenous people who are down south. And what's sad is we continuously and consistently ignore them. A lot of their languages are being lost. Yep. Can't hear it.
Oh, goodness. It's like vibrating my house.
No, can't hear it.
Okay, good.
You're good. And
I heard it, yeah.
You know, having a indigenous woman on the cover of Vogue Mexico was huge and really intense and very massive, but she's one of many, many, many different types of indigenous people. So learning about the third gender of Southern Mexico is going to be buried under our obsession with white people.
Yeah. Which is why I think that, you know, the queer revolution is a decolonization revolution as well. It's this idea of like, you know, our white supremacist colonized society is the one that created this binary. It's the one that eradicated cultures that celebrated the third gender. It's the one that set all of these standards for what femininity and masculinity is, and what people get to have a narrative, what people get to have a voice. Mexico has only had one indigenous president and everybody else is white. You know, like it's a very, very oppressed system that, you know, that is very similar to the United States in that regard, and that equally benefits from that allyship, that understanding, that, you know, level of compassion without comprehension and that representation. And that happens with that invitation of like, hey man, like if you're queer, like let's hang out, let's talk. I mean, like I said before, I don't want to be an authority of what the queer climate looks like in San Miguel, but from my personal experience, there's a drought because I don't, admittedly, I'm also like introverted. I'm an outgoing introvert. So, so it's like, I don't get out much, but I would love to know what other organizations are coming up because I can't do it on my own either.
Yeah.
In the same way that I can't
No,
yeah.
well, I wanted to shift gears just a little bit because I want to be mindful of time, but also I'd love to understand how your queerness translate into your art, if at all.
It doesn't currently, which is not to say that it won't at some point, but I do think it's interesting because I feel like my understanding of femininity and my understanding of my own gender expression had a little bit to do with how I developed myself as an artist, because there was a period of time when I wanted my art to be very gender neutral. And I didn't want people to know that I was female. And there was a period of time when I even wanted to change my identity as an artist, like have an artist name that was gender neutral and that nobody knew what I looked like. And I think that now that I have grown into myself and my own identity, both culturally and within my queerness, I want to celebrate my identity. I want to celebrate my femininity. I don't want to censor my art into this box of gender neutrality, because that box of gender neutrality that I was specifically trying to fit into was one where I was rejecting femininity, not one where I was embracing any gender. It was one where I was saying femininity is lesser than, it doesn't get taken seriously, and therefore I should appear gender neutral so that my femininity isn't a hindrance to my artistic career. And now that I comprehend my queerness enough and my identity enough as a Mexican person, I'm like, well, screw that. I want to celebrate my identity. And it doesn't necessarily come out in my art in terms of the subject matter, but it does in terms of how I present as an artist and what subjects I choose to draw or what colors I choose to put into my art are all just moments in which I challenge myself in terms of like, what am I trying to say about myself and what boxes am I trying to limit myself in out of this habit of silencing my femininity and silencing my queerness. So I'm not necessarily, drawing things for a queer audience, although that's not something that I want to rule out. I would hope to do so at some point, but definitely in just the way that I grow as an artist, I've noticed that it's more about just embracing myself as whatever I want to present and however I want to be.
I love that. I love that. I guess my last question for me, I don't know if you, Aubrey, have more questions, but I'd love to know what you think our listeners should know about being queer in Mexico.
I think that
no, just kidding.
That's a loaded question. I guess in terms of I would want people to know that the Mexican identity is just as complex and diverse as the queer identity, and that we still have a long way to go in terms of how we embrace both and how we grow and accept each other, and that the queer identity in Mexico is very weighed down by this Catholic conservative colonized identity of Mexico as well. And that there's still a lot of awareness that we need to have about violence against queer people, violence against trans people within Mexico, misconceptions about what transsexuality and third genders are in Mexico, and that this is something that hopefully within and thanks to the allyship of others and the representation of others, we are able to translate to Mexico. Because Aubrey, when you asked earlier, like what media is coming out of Mexico that is representative, there's also something to be said about the fact that Mexico is heavily influenced by the United States culture.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
the representation that you guys have up there is just as important to Mexicans as the representation that we have within here. So I guess what I would say to like listeners in the States is like, keep representing, keep talking, keep sharing your stories, because the stories that you are telling are educating us just as much as the ones that we're telling each other, and they're helping us in moving towards the right direction.
Well, and I do think another thing to point out about Mexico, just to add to your statement, is there is a little bit of queer community happening, but it's very privileged. There is a couple festivals that happen either in our hometown or even in Mexico City or some like fancy beach towns, but you have to be relatively financially well off to afford tickets to travel there. The events cost money. So I am seeing, like I'm on this Discord community group of queer people in Mexico. And I remember thinking, first of all, who the fuck knows what Discord is in Mexico? One. Two, you have to have a computer,
I
internet,
didn't do Discord.
in order to access these things. So
Yeah.
if you don't have these things, you're already targeting your audience to be more middle to upper class in Mexico.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I do think that the little movement that we're seeing, especially in the lesbian community or trans community or gay community, is privileged. And it still has to do with that whole concept of how obsessed we are with colonization and skin color.
Yeah, that is very
Yeah.
true. Like in and of itself, like the notoriously gay neighborhood of Mexico City, what's it called? Rosa?
Yeah, La Zona Rosa would
La Zona Rosa.
to the pink zone.
The pink
that kind of
zone.
love and hate all at the same time.
Which is, it's like, it's sort of this like kind of poking fun of, but also adhering to this idea that pink means feminine, and therefore gay men are inherently effeminate, and therefore their section of the city is going to be coded pink. Like it's a very binary, icky way of looking at it. But that area of Mexico City is kind of nice. Like if you walk down it, it's like, kind of bougie, and there's like really pretty restaurants and shops, and it's expensive to be there.
All at the same time.
It's like a little bit of both, but it's like it's nowhere near the outskirts of Mexico City and what the rest of Mexico City looks like. And if you are a trans person walking down Zona Rosa versus a trans person walking down the outskirts of Mexico City, you're going to get treated very, very differently.
It's almost like, and correct me if you think differently, Mila, but it almost feels like if I was an openly out gay man or a trans person walking in San Francisco versus being an openly gay man or trans person walking in downtown
Chicago
or Texas.
or Texas. There you go.
You would have a very different experience. So that's kind of how I compare like La Zona Rosa versus the rest of Mexico. Also, like Mexico City is a massive city, but then you have rural towns in Mexico where there's clearly gay people, gay women, trans people, and they have nowhere to go and nowhere to congregate. And I think what happens when people like Mila and I, when we're like, hey, where's the community? They're like, I don't know what that means. they don't even know how to build it because they've never seen it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
So-
and in and of itself, asking for a community is a privilege in itself, because asking for a community is asking for people to be comfortable with visibility. And that is something that I can definitely say as a straight passing woman and as a cis woman, I don't get to complain about not having a community in that regard, because it's very easy for me, because I don't have to be afraid of that level of violence the way that other people within the queer community could have. And you know, that is a privilege that we need to acknowledge, the ability to just be yourself in a Catholic conservative country that has a lot of violence still against queer people is a privilege. Asking for that kind of visibility is very much a privilege.
yeah, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go, people. No.
Yes.
All right.
yes.
So I want to kind of wrap up our little podcast there, but I know that Aubrey has some additional questions.
No,
Aubrey-
I think we're out of time. I think we're good. Yeah.
No, I know. I meant, but on a personal level, because Mila's my friend. If you have something to go do, Aubrey, I'll tell you about it later. But if you have nothing else to do, go ahead and ask her.
I didn't. Do I?
I don't know.
I don't think I do.
I'm an open book.
I don't think I do.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of yours because I heard
Why?
the podcast about your story. I heard the podcast that introduces
I'm
you.
sorry.
And your
That's not the
story.
right. That's not the
No,
right
no
response.
worries.
Thank you. I
No.
guess is the word.
No,
Is
no
what
worries.
I'm supposed to be saying. I'm like,
I
what?
mean, I'm happy to tell you why. I just think that when I heard your story, I just thought it was so like uplifting and inspiring, and you know, your
It
family
was
is
a
really cool. I follow your
snap
wife on social
reaction.
media.
Well, she's the
She's
outgoing,
adorable.
extroverted one. She's the popular one.
Yeah,
I just post pictures of coffee and tea and the things that I'm writing
there
and
you
the
go.
things that I get published. That's about all I do. So she's the outgoing one. Okay, I did have okay, so you both did this thing called Corseted Community. And
Yeah.
you said it was inspired by Frida Kahlo, who was Mexican artist, probably the only bisexual Mexican that Americans will ever have heard of, which tells you how limiting our knowledge of Mexican culture is. We're like, oh, Frida Kahlo, bisexual, we know her, we could put her on Jeopardy, but we don't know anything else about Mexican culture, which is just the ignorant
Yeah.
American stereotype. What is or was the Corseted Community, and how did you all get involved with that?
Well, the Corseted Community started through my introduction to my dear friend, Tess Howsam.
Mhm.
And she is this artist and community organizer and this genius writer who has a company called, what is it called? Exquisite Corpse Company. Yeah, Exquisite Corpse in New York City. And she and I met through a mutual friend, and she told me that she wanted to write this immersive play about Frida Kahlo and her life. So what her company does is that they do these theater productions that are immersive, where they take you through a physical space as well as a written play. And she wanted to do it, but she was also very self-aware. And she said, you know, I want to do this, but I want to collaborate with a Mexican female artist, because I don't, as a white woman, I don't want to just speak for Frida Kahlo.
Yes,
And
yeah, it's good though. Yeah.
Yeah. So she and I started brainstorming, collaborating, and she came up with this brilliant idea of uniting other female artists of different mediums with this installation piece called the Corseted Community. So the installation piece is a corset made out of gesso of different women's torsos. And then on the outside of the torso, we would paint our or paint or collage the things that we face in life, sort of like armor. And the things that happen to us, or the things that matter to us, or the things that we're fighting against, and things like that. And then on the inside of the corset, we painted it our artistic identity and how that expresses itself. And then Tess and I hung it up in this sort of chandelier-like structure that you can enter, so that you can look at the torsos from the inside and from the outside, and really get to know each of the women through this cast of their torsos, which is what Frida Kahlo started with in terms of a canvas. She had a horrific accident and was having to be confined to a cast on her upper torso that she then started painting as a way of therapy. So that was the inspiration to create this installation piece. So that's how it happened. And then I invited.
I would say I was just recruited by Mila. That's how I got involved.
I was like, who do I know that's an artist and a woman and is interesting? Here we go.
So we found yet another talent of India's.
No,
Another
indeed.
one.
Did you not know that I do art?
No, I know you did art, but you never told me about this.
Oh,
You know?
I do
No,
a
I know
lot of
you do.
art. It's hard for
I
me
know
to
you do art. Like I know you do art, but you never told me about this. So why?
It's fun to.
Well,
it's
very
fun to
cool. That's
explore new
awesome.
mediums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
No.
You never told me about this specific project, but I know you did art. I knew you were an artist.
Yes.
Well, and
Just
the Corseted
never-
community is ever growing. So we are still welcoming torsos from other women. And a lot of the artists that we have are not just visual artists. We had musicians and writers submit pieces as well. And it's just a matter of we want to hear from different women in different representations, and we have them submit their casts. It's a very cool project. It's really
That
fun
is very
to be
cool.
part of it.
That's very cool. Yeah.
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 Tess Howsam, check her out. She's very
Well,
cool.
cool. I will. Thank you.
So the last thing I wanted to add was I realized your Instagram handle is Miss Kiwi Fish.
Uh-huh.
Kiwi Fish.
That is correct. Yes.
So if you want to follow Mila, find her on Miss Kiwi Fish.
MISS Kiwi Fish. Yeah. So
Thank you
you
for
would-
being on the show. We're so
Thank
excited
you
to
for
have you
having
here.
me.
I'm sure there's going to be more talks, but also you were wearing your hair down. And so I felt like I had to wear my hair down. And I realized
So
both you
pretty.
and I have really long hair because of COVID. And I'm like, wow, look at that. We actually have like similar hair.
We do. That's never happened. Also, I see that you're taking care of your curls, and I appreciate that because I'm trying to do the same. I'm trying to nurse my hair back to health.
I was, wearing it in little curly bun things because it was really hot out. And now I'm going to go ride my bike. That's what I've decided I'm going to go do.
Nice. I'm gonna go cough my lungs out because I've been holding in a cough for over an hour now.
Oh no. Well, I'm gonna go for
kind
a,
of recovering.
I'm gonna go for a walk.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
still super hot out, and I can tell the dogs probably want to go on a walk.
Yeah, but I did a walk before we talked, and now I want to do another walk because I'm still having trouble waking up. So I need to do 30 more minutes of exercise before I call it a day.
There you go.
I've done 30, and I think I need 30 more.
Awesome.
Girl, same.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you. I'm glad that we finally got to spend a little more time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you
India,
guys
I
for
will
having
talk to you
me.
later. Bye. You'll take it easy.
Bye,
See you
guys.
later, friend.
Bye.